3 days before the wedding I had paid for, my own sister called me and asked me not to come. I want you to sit with that for a second. Not, we need to talk. Not, there's a problem. Just stay home. My name is Sarah. For most of my life, I believed that family meant showing up for each other, no matter what. I believed that if you loved someone, you gave without expecting anything back. That belief cost me $40,000, 6 months of my life, and almost my sense of who I was. This is the story of how my younger sister Emma asked me to disappear from her wedding day, the wedding I built for her, dollar by dollar, decision by decision, and how I answered that request in a way she never saw coming. But before I tell you what I did, I need you to understand what I gave. I grew up watching my parents struggle. My father worked 2 jobs. My mother stretched every grocery bill until it screamed. Emma was the baby of the family, 5 years younger than me, and somehow, without anyone deciding it out loud, she became the one everyone protected. I became the one who protected her. When I was 19, I dropped out of college for a semester so I could work full-time and help pay rent when Dad got hurt on the job. Nobody asked Emma to do that. She was 14. It made sense at the time. It always made sense at the time. By the time I turned 30, I had built something for myself. A small marketing consulting business, 3 employees, clients who trusted me, a modest but comfortable life I was proud of. I wasn't rich, but I was stable for the first time in my life, and I had earned every bit of it myself. Emma, on the other hand, had just gotten engaged to a man named Daniel, whose family, I'll be honest, made a very different kind of life look easy. Old money, or at least older money than ours. A big house outside the city. A mother, Diane, who wore silence like a weapon and judgment like perfume. The moment Emma got engaged, something in her changed. She started talking differently, dressing differently. She started apologizing for things that used to make her proud. Our childhood apartment, our father's job, the fact that our family didn't have a summer house. I didn't think much of it at first. People get nervous before weddings. People want to impress new in-laws. I told myself it was normal. Then Emma called me crying, saying she wanted the wedding of her dreams, but their savings could only cover a fraction of it, and Daniel's family expected a certain standard. She didn't ask me for money directly. She never had to. She just cried and told me how ashamed she felt and how she didn't want Diane looking down on our family on the one day that mattered most. And I said yes. Of course I said yes. What I didn't know yet was that saying yes to Emma's wedding would mean saying yes to my own quiet erasure. I didn't know that the sister I raised, the sister I protected, the sister I helped when nobody helped me, would one day look me in the eye, or worse, avoid looking me in the eye, and tell me my presence wasn't welcome at the finish line of everything I built for her. But that's exactly what happened. And to understand how something like that becomes possible, you have to go back to the beginning of the planning. Because betrayal, real betrayal, rarely arrives all at once. It arrives in small steps, disguised as reasonable requests, until one day you look up and realize you've been erased in pieces. I want to be clear about something. I didn't pay for Emma's wedding because I was trying to buy love, or prove something, or compete with anyone. I paid for it because I genuinely wanted my little sister to have a beautiful beginning to her marriage. That's it. That was the whole reason. So when Emma sat across from me at my kitchen table with a half-finished Pinterest board and tears in her eyes, I didn't hesitate. I opened my laptop, pulled up my savings, and started making a plan. The venue alone was $12,000. A restored countryside barn with string lights and a lake view. Exactly the kind of place Emma had dreamed about since she was a teenager, cutting pictures out of bridal magazines. I paid the deposit that same week. Then came the dress. Emma tried one on that made her cry the second she looked in the mirror. It cost more than my first car payment. I didn't blink. I just handed over my card. Over the following months, I paid for the catering, the florist, the photographer, the videographer, the string quartet for the ceremony, and the DJ for the reception. I paid for Emma's hair and makeup trial, and the final day of styling for her and her 4 bridesmaids. I paid a deposit to hold the honeymoon suite at a resort in Mexico, a surprise Emma didn't even know about yet. Every single time I handed over money, Emma hugged me and said the same thing. You're the best sister in the world. I don't know what I'd do without you. I believed her. I had no reason not to. But somewhere in the middle of all this planning, Daniel's mother, Diane, started attending meetings that used to be just Emma and me. At first it seemed harmless. Then Diane started making suggestions. Small ones. The kind that seem polite on the surface, but carry a quiet message underneath. Maybe we should upgrade the flowers, dear. We do have a reputation to maintain. The photographer's portfolio is fine, but have you seen what the Whitmore family used for their daughter's wedding? Each upgrade Diane suggested, Emma relayed to me with a nervous laugh, and each time, I paid the difference. Because I could see what was happening. Emma was terrified of disappointing her new family, and I told myself I was protecting her from that fear. What I didn't notice, because I didn't want to notice it, was that with every check I wrote, Emma seemed to distance herself from where the money had actually come from. In conversations with Daniel's family, wedding costs were mentioned in vague terms. We're handling it. It's coming together. Never my sister is paying for this. Never my name at all. I told myself it didn't matter. I wasn't doing this to be thanked publicly. I was doing it because I loved her. Then, 6 weeks before the wedding, something happened that should have been my first real warning. Diane hosted a small engagement dinner at her house, and Emma invited our parents, but very specifically did not invite me. When I found out, through a photo posted online, not through Emma herself, I asked her about it gently, trying not to make it a bigger deal than it needed to be. Emma's answer was quick, almost rehearsed. It was just a small family thing. Very last minute. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I let it go. I told myself I was being too sensitive. I told myself weddings make everyone stressed, and stress makes people forgetful, not cruel. I was wrong. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was preparation. Emma was quietly rehearsing a version of her story where I existed as a checkbook, but not as a sister who deserved a seat at the table. And 3 days before the wedding, that rehearsal became real. It was a Tuesday evening. I remember because I had just finished sending final payment to the caterer, the very last invoice on a wedding that had, by that point, cost me nearly $40,000 of my own savings. My phone buzzed. A message from Emma. Hey, can we talk? It's important. My stomach dropped instantly, the way it does when you already sense something is wrong before you know what it is. I called her right away. Emma's voice was shaky, but not the shaky of someone about to confess a mistake. It was the shaky of someone who had already decided what she was going to say and was just waiting to get through it. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to not be upset. Okay, I said carefully. What is it? There was a long pause. Then she said it. Diane thinks, we all think, it might be better if you didn't come to the wedding. For a moment, I genuinely thought I had misheard her. I actually asked her to repeat it, like my brain refused to process the sentence the first time. She repeated it, slower this time, as if that would soften it. It's not that we don't love you. It's just, Diane's family is very traditional, and some of Daniel's relatives are a little old-fashioned about blended family situations, and honestly, some of them don't even know how involved you were financially, and it might raise awkward questions, and I just think it would be easier, cleaner, if it was just us. You know, the immediate people. I sat completely still, phone pressed to my ear, and I felt something inside me go very quiet. Not loud, not explosive, quiet. The kind of quiet that comes right before something breaks permanently. Emma, I said, I paid for this entire wedding. I know, she said, and here's the part that still replays in my mind. She said it like an inconvenience, like a bill she was hoping I wouldn't bring up. And I'm so grateful. I really am. But this isn't about the money. This is about appearances. Just for one day. Please don't make this harder than it already is. Just for one day. As if the day itself hadn't been entirely built by my hands. I asked her the only question that mattered. Does Daniel know I paid for all of this? Silence. Then, quietly, not exactly all of it. He thinks it was more, split between everyone. And there it was. The full shape of the betrayal, laid out in front of me like a blueprint I had somehow refused to read until now. Emma hadn't just decided to exclude me from her wedding. She had spent months constructing an entire story where my sacrifice didn't exist, where my $40,000 had quietly transformed into the family, pitching in together, where Diane's approval mattered more than my presence, and where the sister who built her dream day with her own hands was now an inconvenient detail to be managed and minimized. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just said, very calmly, okay, Emma, I understand. And I hung up the phone. I sat in my kitchen for almost an hour without moving. The same kitchen table where Emma had cried about wanting her dream wedding. The same table where I had opened my laptop and started writing checks out of love. I thought about calling our parents. I thought about calling Emma back and demanding an explanation. I thought about simply refusing to speak to her ever again. But somewhere in that hour of silence, a different thought started to form. Quiet, steady, clear. If Emma wanted a wedding built entirely on a story that erased me, then maybe it was time the truth showed up anyway. Not through anger, not through a scene, through something far more powerful. The simple, undeniable fact of who had actually paid for everything, delivered at exactly the moment it could not be hidden, denied, or edited out of the narrative again. I wasn't going to ruin my sister's wedding, but I was absolutely going to make sure the truth attended, whether I was in the room or not. I didn't act that night. I have learned, through hard experience, that the worst decisions are the ones made in the first hour of anger. So I gave myself time. 3 days, to be exact, since that's all I had before the wedding. But in those 3 days, I didn't spend a single minute plotting anything cruel. I want to be honest about that, because this isn't a story about revenge through destruction. It's a story about revenge through truth. There's a difference, and it matters. Here is what I actually controlled that Emma and Diane didn't know about. First, the venue. The countryside barn was booked and paid for under my business name because I had negotiated a corporate discount through a client connection. The final balance, due on the day of the event, was still outstanding, a standard 15% held back until day of headcount confirmation, which is completely normal in event contracts. I was, technically, still the one the venue would be calling if anything needed confirming. Second, the honeymoon. The resort suite in Mexico was booked under my name as a surprise gift, with the confirmation email sitting quietly in my inbox, not Emma's. Third, and most importantly, the photographer. I had personally hired her, a wonderful woman named Priya who I had worked with for years through my business. Priya and I had built a real friendship, not just a client relationship. When I told her, carefully and without asking her to do anything dishonest, that I might not be attending the wedding after all despite paying for everything, she was stunned into silence. I made her one simple request. Nothing manipulative, nothing dramatic. I asked her to include, somewhere in the wedding photo package she'd deliver afterward, a printed thank you card in the same box as the final photo album. The kind of card any professional photographer includes as a courtesy. Except this one would simply say the truth, plainly, warmly, without a trace of bitterness. To Emma and Daniel, congratulations on your beautiful day. It was an honor to photograph a wedding built entirely from Sarah's love and generosity. Every flower, every dress, every dance floor moment exists because your sister gave everything she had to make this day possible. I hope you always remember who made your dream come true. That's it. That was my entire revenge. A card. The truth, printed and placed exactly where it would eventually be seen. Not by strangers, not publicly, not to humiliate Emma in front of guests, but by the two people who needed to actually understand what had happened. Daniel, who didn't know the truth, and Emma, who had tried very hard to make sure he never would. I also made one more decision. Since I would not be attending, and since the final balance on both the venue and several vendor contracts required my personal authorization as the paying client, I informed each vendor, calmly and professionally, that all future correspondence and final day approvals should now go directly through Emma and Daniel. Not out of spite. Simply because, if I wasn't welcome as family, I had no obligation to continue managing logistics as an invisible, unpaid coordinator either. This meant Emma, 3 days before her wedding, suddenly had to personally handle confirming the final headcount with the venue, approving the day of timeline with the coordinator, verifying delivery details with the florist, and confirming the final catering menu changes that Diane had requested just that week. All tasks I had quietly handled for 6 months without complaint. All tasks that would now, very visibly, land directly in Emma's hands 3 days before her wedding, when she had never once handled a single vendor conversation herself. I didn't sabotage anything. I didn't cancel a single booking. I simply stepped back into being exactly what Emma had asked me to be. Not family, a resource. And resources, when withdrawn, are noticed immediately. I sent Emma one final text before the wedding. Calm, measured, no anger in the words at all. I understand you don't want me there, and I respect that this is your day to shape however you choose. I've let the vendors know that final approvals should go through you and Daniel from here. I hope everything goes exactly the way you dreamed. I didn't hear back. I honestly didn't expect to. I didn't go to the wedding. I want to be honest about that, because some people expect a dramatic scene where I show up uninvited and deliver a speech. That's not what happened. I stayed home, exactly where Emma asked me to be. But staying home didn't mean staying blind. My mother, who had no idea about the phone call or my decision to step back from vendor coordination, called me that evening in a state of complete confusion. Sarah, everything is falling apart. Where are you? Emma's been on the phone with the venue for an hour. She didn't know the final head count had to be confirmed by noon. She's crying in the bathroom of the getting ready suite. I felt something complicated in that moment. Not joy exactly. I never wanted Emma to suffer. But I did feel something like relief. The relief of no longer being the invisible hand holding everything together while receiving none of the credit and, apparently, none of the welcome either. I'm sure Daniel's family will help her figure it out, I said quietly. I'm not really involved in the planning anymore. My mother didn't understand yet. She would, soon enough. The wedding, from what I later learned through my parents, went forward mostly as planned, though with visible cracks. The florist delivered the wrong centerpiece style because Emma had approved a change she didn't fully understand, mixing up details I would have caught instantly after months of managing every vendor conversation myself. The coordinator had 2 separate moments where she needed a decision only I would have known how to make, and Emma froze, unsure, because she had simply never had to think about any of it before. Diane, apparently, grew visibly tense throughout the day, watching her son's new wife stumble through details a bride typically never even sees, let alone has to manage under pressure. But the wedding still happened. Emma still walked down the aisle. Daniel still cried when he saw her. The ceremony, by every account, was beautiful. I want to be clear about that, because I never wanted to destroy my sister's wedding day. I only wanted to stop carrying it silently while being erased from the picture entirely. The real moment, the one that actually mattered, didn't happen at the wedding at all. It happened 3 weeks later, when Priya delivered the final wedding album to Emma and Daniel's new apartment. I wasn't there for that either. But my mother was, having stopped by to help the newlyweds unpack wedding gifts. And she told me everything, in a voice still shaking with disbelief, later that same night. According to my mother, Emma and Daniel sat together on their couch, opening the beautifully wrapped photo album box, laughing and reminiscing about the day. Daniel's parents, Diane included, had come over as well to look through the photos together, a small family gathering to relive the wedding. Tucked inside the box, exactly where I had asked Priya to place it, was the card. My mother said the room went completely silent as Daniel read it aloud, his voice slowing down as the words sank in. It was an honor to photograph a wedding built entirely from Sarah's love and generosity. Daniel stopped reading halfway through and looked up. My mother said his expression shifted from confusion to something much heavier, much more serious. Emma, he said slowly. What does this mean? I thought your parents helped pay for this. I thought it was split between everyone. Emma, according to my mother, went pale. She tried to explain, stumbling over her words, saying it wasn't a big deal, that I had just helped out a little, that the card was probably exaggerating. But Daniel had questions now. Specific ones. He asked about the venue. Emma admitted, quietly, that I had paid the entire deposit and balance. He asked about the dress. Same answer. The photographer, the florist, the honeymoon suite that Emma still hadn't told him was a gift. Every single answer led back to the same name. Sarah. Diane, my mother said, sat frozen on the couch, her carefully maintained composure completely gone. Because the story she had helped construct, the story where her son had married into a family of comparable means, where appearances had been maintained, where nothing needed to be questioned, had just collapsed in front of her, in her own son's living room, from a simple thank you card she never saw coming. Daniel, to his credit, didn't yell. My mother said he simply asked one final question, the one that mattered most. Why didn't you want her there? Why would you keep the person who gave us all of this away from our wedding? Emma didn't have a good answer. Because there wasn't one. There never had been one. There was only fear and image, and a mother-in-law's approval valued above a sister's presence. That night, Emma called me for the first time since the phone call that started all of this. She was crying, apologizing, saying she didn't know what had come over her, that Diane had made her feel like our family wasn't good enough, that she'd been so scared of being judged that she made the worst decision of her life. I listened. I didn't hang up this time. But I also didn't rush to forgive her, because forgiveness that comes too easily rarely teaches anything at all. I want to pause here and be honest about something. This story isn't really about a printed card, or a wedding, or even about money. It's about what happens when someone lets fear of judgment override loyalty to the people who actually love them. Emma asked to meet me in person, not over the phone, a few days after that conversation with Daniel. She showed up at my apartment looking exhausted, the kind of exhausted that comes from finally facing something you've been avoiding for months. I don't even know how to start apologizing, she said. I told her the truth. Start by telling me why you thought I wasn't good enough to stand in that room. Emma cried through most of what came next. She explained, as honestly as she could, that from the moment she got engaged, she felt like she was constantly auditioning for Diane's approval. That every conversation with Daniel's family made her feel like our upbringing, our parents' jobs, our modest apartment growing up, was something to apologize for rather than something to be proud of. She admitted that asking me to stay away wasn't really about hiding me. It was about hiding herself, hiding where she came from, hiding the truth that her dream wedding wasn't built on old family money or generational wealth, but on her older sister working hard and sacrificing everything to give her a beautiful day. I was so scared of looking poor, Emma said quietly, that I made the person who kept us from ever actually being poor feel completely worthless. It was, honestly, the most truthful thing she had said to me in over a year. I told Emma something I believed then and still believe now. I told her that money can rebuild almost anything, savings accounts, wedding funds, even trust, slowly, over time. But some moments, once they happen, simply become part of the story forever. The moment she asked me to stay home would always be part of her wedding story now, whether she liked it or not. The question wasn't whether that moment could be erased. It couldn't. The question was what she chose to do with the truth of it going forward. Daniel, to his credit, reached out to me directly not long after. He apologized on behalf of decisions he hadn't known about, and told me plainly that he had no idea how much I had sacrificed, and that had he known, he never would have allowed the wedding conversation to happen the way it did. He also told me, quietly, that he'd had a serious conversation with his mother about the difference between family loyalty and social appearances, and that Diane's opinions would no longer carry the weight they used to in his marriage. I appreciated that. Not because I needed an apology from Daniel's side of the family, but because it told me Emma hadn't married into a situation that would keep repeating the same pattern. As for Emma and me, we didn't fix everything overnight. Trust doesn't work that way, no matter how good the intentions are. But over the following months, something real started to rebuild. Emma started including me again, not as a checkbook, not as a coordinator, but as a sister. She introduced me properly to Daniel's extended family at a holiday gathering, this time using my actual name, my actual role in her life, without a single vague explanation. Looking back, I don't regret paying for Emma's wedding. I don't regret a single dollar. What I regret is how long it took me to notice that generosity, without respect standing beside it, isn't actually love being returned. It's just quiet erasure, dressed up in gratitude. Here's what this experience taught me, and I think it's worth sharing honestly, without any bitterness attached to it. Love and money are not the same currency, but people will sometimes try to make you believe they are. They will accept everything you give, while slowly convincing themselves, and everyone around them, that your presence and your contribution are somehow separate things. That you can be useful without being valued. That you can be essential while being invisible. The truth always finds a way into the room eventually. Sometimes it takes a printed card inside a photo album. Sometimes it takes a direct question from someone brave enough to ask it. But the truth does not stay buried forever, no matter how carefully someone tries to bury it. I also learned something about myself in those 3 days between Emma's phone call and the wedding. I learned that standing up for your own worth doesn't require shouting or revenge in the traditional sense or burning anything down. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop performing a role you were never actually valued in and let the truth stand on its own, exactly where it belongs. I didn't ruin my sister's wedding. I let the truth attend in my place. And in the end, that truth did something anger never could have done. It forced an honest conversation that anger alone would have only delayed. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in this story, if you've ever given everything to someone you love, only to feel yourself slowly erased from your own sacrifice, I want you to hear this clearly. Your worth was never meant to be hidden to protect someone else's comfort. Real love doesn't ask you to disappear. It makes room for you, especially on the days that matter most. Emma and I are close again now, closer in some ways than we were before all of this happened, because for the first time, our relationship is built on honesty instead of quiet obligation. She thanks me now, out loud, in front of people, without hesitation or vague explanations. It's a small thing, but after everything, it means more to me than any amount of money ever could. Sometimes the people we protect the most are the ones who need to learn, painfully and honestly, what it actually costs to almost lose us. And sometimes, the quietest kind of justice isn't the loudest revenge. It's simply the truth, finally allowed to speak for itself. Thank you for listening to my story. If it moved you, or reminded you of someone in your own life, share it with them. And if you've ever had to fight to be seen by the people you love most, know this, you're not alone, and your worth was never up for negotiation.